Red Eyes members. As always, great to have you with us, and thank you for joining us this second segment with Paul Levy from awakenindthedream.com. We are going to begin to talk about synchronicity in this segment. And Paul, as you mentioned, before, you are a student of Carl Jung, so maybe it would be a good idea to kind of backtrack a little bit and just go over the kind of a little bit of the basic and set the tone for us, if you will, and maybe describe kind of the concept of a synchronistic universe for us.
Sure, totally. Well, the thing with synchronicities is that there are those moments in time where something outside of time kind of will manifest in our world, and it's when an inner condition that's happening inside of us all of a sudden is given shape and form to through the medium of the seemingly outside world. And so there's a correspondence to what's happening, inside of us and outside. So that boundary between the inner and the outer really dissolves and collapses at those synchronistic points in time. And it can really snap us out of the spell that a lot of us are under of having an imagination that we exist in a time-bound sort of dimension, and that, the imagination that we exist as separate selves, because the synchronistic phenomena really are expressions that we're actually connected with the entire field, and that the field of consciousness, it actually is has multiple channels, and in a way that the deeper process that's happening inside of us, because it has these multiple channels, can actually express itself by configuring events in the seemingly outer world. And what, from one perspective, what I'm describing, with synchronicity sounds really, really so far out, but it's actually, just the opposite of that, because it's something that we all experience in our lives at different points. And the thing about synchronicities, which is really interesting, very much like symbols in a dream, when you think about, well, here dreams speak symbolically, that's their language, but symbols don't exist objectively. They're actually an expression of the consciousness that's observing the symbols.
Yes.
In the same way with synchronicities, they don't exist as in this objective way that's separate from our own consciousness. And what that then is pointing towards is that, well, it really brings up the question, is there a way that we can actually evoke synchronicities to happen more often that could actually be guiding us? And just in real essence, what we discover is that to the extent that we're actually turned on to that this is a synchronistic, whatever, this world we live in, that's the extent that our experience manifests in a synchronistic fashion, that it's a reflection of our state of consciousness. And it has profound, the implications for what for what we're all interested in about, how we can awaken. The implications of what synchronicities are really pointing at are just immense.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that actually was a question I wanted to ask you here about, if synchronicity can be, I put this in quotes, controlled, because that's a dated word in that sense. But I mean, does this, happen when we, really, really want it to happen, or could it be that this is just a phenomena that kind of shows up, so to speak, whenever it pleases? Like it's a very, evasive force that's very difficult to pinpoint,
Right. Sure. No, and that's a really important question, because, the thing with synchronicities, I mean, they do on the one hand have a seeming like this autonomy that they just happen, on their own. And the idea of any of us trying to control, it's like being in a dream. If you're trying to control the dream, that's not really the way, because, to actually try to control things is to sort of not be in phase with one's deeper nature. But the thing to understand about synchronicities is that they always happen when we access and connect with the archetypal dimension of our experience. And and one way to understand archetypes, because it sounds like a real complicated, term, but it's actually something we all understand from the inside, because in a way it's like a psychological instinct. It's like an informational field of influence that patterns how we apprehend the world, and how we actually how we experience the world and ourselves. The archetypes, in a way, are like sort of like these blueprints that pattern that. And what happens with synchronistic phenomena is that when we actually connect with that deeper, the archetypal dimension, that's when the synchronicities happen. And the way to understand that is, so say, for example, if like inside of ourselves we actually connect with the archetype, well, then the seemingly outer dimension of our experience in the world theater will actually, in a synchronistic way, reflect back that experience of that we're actually, in a way, fluent or in touch with the archetype in ourselves. But but the thing is, the same thing is conversely true, where if there's an archetype that's actually activated in the seemingly outer, whatever dimension of our experience in the field, that actually itself is a reflection of something of the archetype that's in ourselves. So the point is that the archetype is something that's not bound by space or time, and that it's an inner condition, in a way, of the soul that actually can manifest and express itself through the medium of the outer world. And when that correspondence becomes really clear, that's the synchronistic event, because the synchronicity is like actually, those experiences where that correlation, that correspondence becomes really just crystallized and visible.
Yes. Yes. In your latest article called Catching the Bug of Synchronicity, you wrote the following. There is an instantaneous, as you said, correspondence between the inner and the outer worlds, not because they are two separate dimensions that are communicating faster than the speed of light, but that they actually are inseparably united as one seamless, already unified whole continuum. And I like that idea a lot, that this isn't something that is disconnected, but it's actually taking place, if you will, all the time. So one question that arises, one thing that I've been pondering upon rather, is that this actually might be happening all the time around us. Synchronicity might be, it's a constant, if you will, of the universe, but we're not paying close enough attention to catch them all, if you follow my drift there.
Right. No, that's totally it. I mean, from one point of view, and I think this is a real point of view, is that, every moment is like, one big synchronicity, so to speak. And it's just a question of, do we have the recognition of that or not? And the thing which is interesting about this is that, it's a contagious state of mind. And the thing I mean by that is that when like, one person is turned on to that the nature of this universe is synchronistic, they actually like have an effect on other people's unconscious, and a field gets created when there are people who are actually turned on to the dreamlike nature, because synchronicities are expressions of the dreamlike nature. And, so not only is it contagious, but it's a state of mind that we can turn each other onto and help to stabilize and help to deepen. And then, of course, when you bring people together like that, it's in Buddhism what's called the Sangha, which is the third. They talk about the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. The teacher, the teaching, and the Sangha is the community of fellow awakening beings. And it's the word bodhisattva, actually the translation is an awakening being. And we're all awakening beings. We're all bodhisattvas in training. And the point is that we can hang out with each other and connect with each other in a way that actually we help each other to deepen the lucidity, to activate the synchronistic awareness, to turn each other on to the dreamlike nature, and that just gets reflected back by the field, and that insinuates itself and influences the field.
Right.
And that's a really profound thing, because that's, we were talking before about the war on consciousness. That's really, that's the way to, in a way, to kind of engage in the war on consciousness, is through, because it's that war is insinuating itself through the instrument of consciousness itself. So to the extent that we actually begin to wake up through expanded consciousness, that's the way that we can just really bring in the light, so to speak, to dispel the darkness that's actually playing out.
So the more you pay attention to something, the more real it becomes, or rather it happens more and more often if we begin to point it out and notice it, right? So if we become aware of it and focus on it, that's something that potentially is going to propel us forward in life, so to speak, and we can actually learn to incorporate it into our own lives in a different way than just being this random kind of weird phenomena that just pops up now and then, And I guess that some people would say that this happened to them much more often than some other people. And what I've been finding is that this often happens to people that are very much of that mindset, so to speak, that are in the synchronistic realm basically all the time,
Yeah. And the thing which is also important, I think, to understand with reference to this conversation is that it's really related, because some of the articles that I've written in the last year have been about like the archetype of the shaman and like, the archetype of the wounded healer. And it's all having to do, and also the artist, the creative artist, because it's figures like that, the wounded healer, shaman, and artist, and whether you say the bodhisattva or whatever, that are the figures that are going to heal our planet. Because, you see, we've all, in a sense, we're all shamans in training, and part of the way that archetype, and the synchronicities come out of that experience of, being wounded healers or shamans or bodhisattvas, in the sense that it's because we've all had this wound, in whether it be with our family of origin or in the world process. How can we not be disturbed and like traumatized by what's happening?
Yeah.
But the whole key is, if we try to avoid that wound, or that the pain from that, or the trauma of what's actually happening, and if we do that, we're unwittingly feeding into, the actual sort of, the evil that's playing out. But if we actually go through the wound, or through just stay present with what's happening, then we're actually discovering, what you discover is that what you're experiencing personally is not a personal process, but it's more like an archetypal process. You all of a sudden discover, oh wow, I'm actually playing this role in a deeper mythic unfoldment,
right.
And that we're all just figures in this deeper dream that's incarnating through our species, and that experience is to snap out of the personalistic perspective of taking things personally, and even imagining that we exist as a separate person who's separate from the field, separate from the whole universe. And it's to connect with, oh wow, we're actually interconnected beings who are interdependent, and there's like a deeper, like an archetypal process that's playing itself out. And by seeing that, that's the perspective, that's the point of view through which the synchronistic phenomena then can actually crystallize and manifest.
Absolutely fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of dreams and also kind of the relationship to synchronicity. How about the story of the golden scarab? Do you remember it? You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. And this is the prototype, really, of synchronistic phenomena. Jung talks about this because he was onto the synchronicities, and he was so whatever. It was such a huge thing for him that it was over 20 years that he waited before he actually published anything about it, because he was aware that it was so off the radar of consensus, thinking. And what happened for him, he had a patient who was really caught in her intellect, and she was really stuck. And one day she came in and she had this dream of this golden scarab. Somebody gave her this piece of jewelry, like a scarab, a golden scarab. And she was telling Jung the dream. And at the exact moment that she was telling him the dream, there's a tapping on the window of his office. And he opens up the window, and into the room flies this golden beetle that he catches in his hand, and he offers to her, and he says the words, "Here is your golden scarab." And he then says, from that point on, the therapy went really well, because it snapped her out of her self-created, like the intellect.